let's go ahead and start then. If y'all will, one of you, let me get you a piece of paper. I can't record roll because Blackboard, we can't access Blackboard. It's not that Blackboard's down, we just can't access it. All right, two things I want to do today. One is I want to show y'all how to change the cards in the router. And then secondly, I'm going to go over a VLSM example. Okay? So if y'all would just sign your names on that piece of paper. Put 2451 in today's date at the top for me. So, and then you got to get up and bring the paper over to him so you can come back here and stand here and watch me then. I won't waste your energy. Did you want ink in it too? Did you want ink in it too?
That would be nice.
Okay. All right. On the newer routers, they come. That's one already done. They come. And the little footings literally came off on me when I went to move it. That one disintegrated. They come with openings for the ports to be put in there. And so we could put fiber ports in there if we had fiber connections. We could put serial ports in there, which is what we're going to do in just a second. Or other type ports, or if we needed some RJ45 ports for it instead, is what we were needing, we can get those ports and slide in there. So they just come on a card, and they're real simple to do, but just to show y'all so you know, and that you can go, yeah, I've seen that done. And we've had these sitting here, but just haven't really used them. But we don't have to open the router up or anything to do this, which is the neat part. So, and I really need a bigger blade on the screwdriver, but that doesn't come with our kit, so I just have to be careful. And I don't have my car today that does have a bigger blade in it. It's over in the shop.
I might actually have one in my car.
But that's all we needed. I got it.
Yeah.
I just have to push hard when I do it. Of course, I just realized these are the combination screws, and so I could have used, I think I got a big enough flat blade. And these are the ones that you can either use the Phillips or the flat blade on. So that's all that takes to take it out of there. And then to put the other one in, all that is involved. And it will only go one way, because if you notice it's all notched all over the place. So you have to put the board through the notch, and it just slides down in there, and it pushes it down into the connector on the motherboard down. And then theoretically the screws tighten back in. And that's it. That's all it takes. And if we suddenly went, okay, we're not going to use that, we've got now fiber coming into our business, and fiber all the way coming past the connector box, coming to here. All we got to do is go buy a fiber card, pull this card, stick the fiber card in. or actually in this case, it's still got one more spot. You can just plug it in and still leave the other one sitting there. As opposed to the old ones, I guess that's right here. That these were all built in, and then they didn't use the serial mini connector. They used the special serial connector that plugged into them. They couldn't be changed out, so you were limited. So if you look at these are much more modular boxes that you can change the connectors out. And actually these will switch too, but you got to open the whole box up to get to them. And then the NV RAM switches out also. The flash RAM just comes out on the card that I've shown y'all before. It's just got a flash card in there. Not a big one, because it's only a 32 meg card, but that's all it needs. But if we need bigger, all we have to do is just go buy another bigger flash card. And if this machine fails, so we got to replace it, we got another machine, pull this out, stick it in the new machine, and we're ready to go exactly like this machine did. That everything looks like the same on our network, which really works nicely. So, because this is working off the flash memory also, not forever, yeah, there. Our old machines were working off flash memory also in there, because remember your directions all tell you on how to save to the flash memory. Except for that it's built in flash memory, so it wasn't where you could just pull it. You had to transfer it to a PC and then do the transfer, where this, they just went, let's go with external removable. And that it works conveniently. Gee, I got the button to hold incorrectly that time too. So that's all that's involved there. They actually throw in this box here too, that they've got a wrist strap they included with them. And they do warn you, make sure it's turned off when you do it. There's a note in there somewhere that there's no power applied to it, and I don't think I had any power applied to it, did I? So, and that is a 3D printer sitting up there that I've gotten out of the box. We just got to get it all hooked up now. That's what's been sitting up there in that big box, and I finally got it out today.
I wondered what that was. I didn't see the school splurging for a massive CP case, PC case.
We spent $2,500 on this, I think. So we've actually spent a good bit of money on that. But so we have because last year I had requested it 2 years ago or something, and then last year they said, we got money for printers. You've got requests in for 2 different printers. You can have the printers. And they gave me a large amount of money, and what we needed was this printer. I wanted this printer. We didn't need this printer. Because it'll make some nice demonstration and stuff to do with it. And that we did need a regular printer over on the Catoosa campus, because one of the classrooms, they didn't buy us enough PCs and they didn't buy a printer for the classroom. Well, we're still short PCs in that classroom, but I do have a printer in there now. It was odd that that's what where they went to cutting, they said, when they were short on money building the building. All right. So there y'all have played with the router this morning, seen how to change interfaces on it. And that is a newer concept. Those routers, I'm guessing we've had them 5 or 6 years, but they're on the newest things that Cisco's using. Cisco actually told us when I was at my meeting last week, or week before last, that those older routers are still perfectly fine also, and they can still be upgraded to the current OS and stuff. And they said those will work also still fine.
What if you needed a different interface, but you had an old router? You just get
Then at that point you're going to have to go buy a new router. So that's a limitation on those. But those routers go back they're probably 18 years old, or 18 to 20 years old. They said they're still working the same. The OS actually will upgrade still on them, and they said they still work fine.
Yeah.
And there's not a speed difference. Now the other limitation on them is that you've only got the 100. I think we got the 100 gig. Because the new ones have got the 1,000. I've got the 1 gig ports for the RJ45. Where's the RJ45 on here? So we just got a console and auxiliary. So you're more limited on these in any event. So you don't even have. It's gotta be. I'm not looking at something right. Serials to connect router to router. I thought the port was on the other side. Strange. Because this has only got 100 meg port on it for the Ethernet. And this one should be a gig. Because this should be a 1000, 1000. That's just 100 also. It's not a 1000 either. Okay. That's surprising. Either that or I can't remember the number correctly. It says FE, so it's a 1000. It's a 100, yeah. All right, let's look at VLSM now. But you had these huge serial cables before. These blue ones replace those now, so you don't have that humongous thing with these humongous plugs anymore on them, which is nice. Say, there must be a marker in here somewhere. All right, Blackboard is down today. Well, Blackboard's really not down. The single logon is down. Without the single logon, you can't log into Blackboard. However, if your machine at home is still logged into Blackboard from earlier today, you can keep on working as long as it stays logged in. You just can't log in again. Does that make sense? Because the server with single logon is what they've taken down for the day. Because it's working off of Banner, my GNTC, to get y'all's usernames and such. All right. VLSM, variable length subnet masking. What we're going to do is, where we talked about just subnetting last week, now we're going to be able to set that we're going to be able to subnet the subnets, which you could do on the other, but instead of having all equal the same size of subnets on your network, you can do with the VLSM, you can set different size subnets. So you're going to subnet for your largest subnets first, and then you'll take your leftover subnet, so you'll make sure you have an extra one, and then you'll subnet it for your smaller subnets. Now, that will increase your efficiency. It will also allow you to subnet to meet requirements sometimes that you couldn't do with just regular subnetting. Because with what I showed you last week, with just regular subnetting, every subnet's all the same size. So if we needed a subnet that has 60 hosts, 60 hosts, 60 hosts, 30 hosts, and 30 hosts. And if y'all watch the PowerPoint out there from Cisco, that I've got posted out there in your course, they got an error in it. They go through and talk about doing this with 62, 62, 62, 32, 32. The only thing is their example doesn't give you that many hosts because you can only get 60. Well, I guess 62 would work, correction. You can't do the 32 that they've got, but we can do 62s here. But I'm pretty sure they got 32 on the last two of them. And that won't work. Because if you do 32 usable hosts, that's going to require another bit borrowed on it. 30 cuts us down. Because remember, if you do it on it. So, if we wanted to do that, what we showed you last week, basically you'd need 62. It'd have to be set up for 62 and 5 subnets, because every one of them would have to have 62 addresses on them. How many addresses if we've got a Class C address, which is what this example was using, so 192.168.8.0, and that's with a 255, 55.0 subnet mask. In this case, how many hosts can we even have given that address? $254, because it's a Class C address. And all we can use is the last octet, so we only have 254 hosts. Here, if we had have tried to do this using that address, like we did last week, it wouldn't work because we would have had to make them all big enough to handle 62, because all of them have to be the same size, and that gives you 310 hosts. You would have to have addresses available, even though you're not going to use 310, because the number here looks okay, because you've only got 246 addresses. So the number of things we want to put on there theoretically would fit in there, but when you go to subnet it, it's not going to fit under normal subnetting. If we do VLSM, what we're going to do is set up first for our large ones. So we need 3 subnets just for the 62. And then we need a 4th subnet sitting there that we're going to then make into the 2 smaller ones. So if we go back to our byte, the 8 bits, To do that then, we're going to need to have 4 subnets to start with. Ultimately, we need 5 subnets. But we're going to have 4 of the large subnets. Does everybody follow that part? So if we need 4 subnets, we said just start numbering from the left backwards and just start from 2, forget about the 1s. And so remember, that's not for the number that's actually our subnet mask. That's just for finding how many bits are we going to borrow. If we need 4, we're going to borrow 2 bits. So now our boundary is right here. Okay? Now, if we regularly number this, that's the 1s, 2s, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s, 64s, and the 128s. Since we've drawn it on this line here, the book takes the approach of that this right here is the magic bit. I don't think they really play it as well as they should have. I'm going to tell you it's got the magic number. That right there is your number that I told you when you start doing the chart, you're going to generate your chart using that number. Because remember, we borrowed 2 bits here, so now if we go and come up here to build our chart, that we've got the 0, 0, the 0, 1, the 1, 0, and the 1, 1. Okay? Now, we're not going to build this last one because we're going to play with it further. So let's build the first 3, which is what we need for these 3. So this network address is going to be the 0, 0 followed by 6 zeros. Correct? The host, the first host will be 0, 0, 5 zeros, and a 1, which converts to what? A 1. This host is going to be 0, 0 followed by 4 zeros. Not 4 zeros, 4 1s and a 0. I'm getting my zeros and 1s mixed up. Which should give us 30. That's not right. That should give us 62. Okay? Because that's a 1, 1. Did I just say 4 zeros? It's 5. Or 4 1s, it's 5 1s and a 0. And that's going to add up to 62. Okay? The 5 1s followed by a 0, with the 0, 0 to start it. And then our broadcast would be the 0, 0 followed by 6 1s, which should give us 63. Now, our subnet mask for that one, that network, is the 255.255.255, and then we've got 1s in the first 2 positions, and then followed by 6 zeros. So that's 1, 1, followed by 6 zeros. Because remember, the subnet mask has got 1s where it's the network portion, 0s where it's the host portion. So with 2 1s in front, that's going to be 128 and 64. So that's going to be a 192 as our subnet mask for that one. Which, last week's example, it would have been the subnet mask for every one of your networks. They would have all had the same subnet mask. And I don't think I really mentioned that last week. But that will give you, in that case, it's going to change this week because remember, we're doing variable length subnet mask. So the second row, the network address is actually 64 because this 1 is in the 64s column. That there was what I told you last week is your magic number last week to filling out your whole table then. Because then you just got to add 64s all over the place to everything on down. Everybody agree on that? So that meant this was 0.65, this was 126, and this is 127. Our subnet mask for this one and the next line is going to be the same thing. Because we're still only borrowing the first 2 bits on these first 3. Because it's a Class C address, so that was all 1s for the first 3 octets. And then we borrowed 2 bits, so that's 1s in the second, in the first and second, in the 4th octet. So the third one is going to be 128, 129, 190, and 191. Now, given that, our network address for this next one would be 192, which it will still be. However, we don't want to use this one as one subnet. We want to produce 2 subnets now out of there. Does everybody follow that? Now, that's going to work just like what we just did to get this one. We're going to get that one. How many more bits do we need to borrow to get 2 more subnets? Now our number of this 248 starts from here and runs on across. So that means we need to borrow 1 bit to get 2 more subnets, right? So now this becomes what they call a magic bit. I would still call to you that this is now our magic number. Okay? No longer is it 64, it's 32s working at this point. Everybody got that part? Now, when we go to do this next, if we went on and did the additional line, which we will do, so now we're going to have a 0 in the 3rd position for this one because we're borrowing 3 bits. And our next line will be the 111 because there's our 2 combinations on that, but the other 2 bits stay the same. Okay? So to get to this number from here is not adding the 64 to it anymore. That's going to be adding 32 to it now because that was our magic number off here, which is in their magic bit column. Okay? And I just figured out what they were saying when I was looking at the PowerPoint the other night and was putting it out there for y'all. The Chapter 8 PowerPoint is not out there yet. I've hit a technical glitch. I've got it ready. I went to load it, and there's a maximum amount of stuff you can put in a folder in a Blackboard, I found out. I don't know what that magic number is, but the Chapter 8 PowerPoint puts me over the number. And I know where my problem is I gave y'all out there the pathway documents for all the CIS programs, which shows you which courses are taught which semester for your sequencing through of what you should be taking each semester you're here as a full-time or as a hypothetical part-time student. If you're a part-time student, you may not take semester to semester, work out exactly like it is. But those courses will be there those semesters. As we arbitrarily decided, part-time students take 2 courses per semester on it. And if there's a part-time student that can only take 1 course a semester, obviously it drags out a lot longer. And they may or may not match exactly all the way along the way. If it's a full-time student and they take what we've got marked there each semester, in summer we actually only have students some of the times only taking 2 courses in the summer instead of the 3. Because actually they have a reduced workload some for us, and the other part is you're doing summer in 8 to 10 weeks. And Mr. Spurlock and I choose to do 8 weeks in the summer. We could actually do 5 weeks, but y'all don't want to do courses in 5 weeks. I did that one time. I taught when we went from quarters to semesters somewhere back 10 years ago or something. For the summer quarter, they had us to do that conversion to switch, because we had to shorten up on the quarter to be able to get the semester start when they started. We had a 5-week quarter that summer. It was murder on me as instructor and the students. Because think about what y'all are doing this semester, and that you were doing in a third of the time. So what you do in 3 weeks, they did in 1 week. It's one thing to go down to do what's in 2 weeks to 1 week. But doing 3 weeks to 1 week and taking a couple of courses, and I actually was teaching 3 courses and was actually technically off for the month of July that summer. And then teaching 3 courses part-time, supposedly. And it was murder on me. And by the end of when we got down to the end of the 5 weeks, I told the students, I'll never do this again. Try to do regular courses in 5 weeks of multiples of them. And the students were all griping of, it was murder on them trying to get it all done. So it was bad news for everybody involved, but we still offer that, and we actually have some instructors that do teach, but it's usually ones that are only teaching a class for the summer. I was actually traveling out west that summer while I did it. That's a big picture frame on my wall in my office. And I went, good grief, I've just worked full time for the month. And I was supposed to have it off, and I was just going to teach a couple of courses extra. Nope. Every night I was spending hours in the motel room on classes. So for this one, this network address for this one would be the 1111, which puts us ones in the 128, 64, and 32's column, which will give us 0.224, which notice is 32 bigger than that number, okay? Now that one was 64 bigger than there. This one will be 64 bigger also, because it's needing to start from there. But now this one's going to shift, okay? Because this one was the 110 followed by 4 ones and a 1. This one is only going to be 30 bigger than that. So that should give us 222. So notice this only went up by 32. Okay? But these first 2 numbers are going to still have to go up by the amount of that number. But then at this point, we've now shifted to using this number, because this was the 0.110 11110. Okay? This one would then just be 1 higher than that number, just like we've seen before. So that's 0.223, which leads to the 0.224. Now, this row will then work off of this magic number. So that this will be 0.225, because 32 and that's 225. 32 and that is 0.254. And 32 and that is 0.255, which is the largest number we can use, right? So we have used everything right there. Y'all follow on that, what we've done? As we did right before we got down to here, and then we need two more smaller subnets. So we borrowed additionally for that. Okay? And you can borrow all the way over to the 7th position. No, over to the 6th position, sorry. Because you're going to have 2 usable and the broadcast and network addresses always on a subnet. It's got to have 4 addresses, so you've got to leave the 2 bits. So that means if we're setting up router to router, a subnet there with the VLSM, we can actually use a 0.252 address network to set up that one and not waste on it. We won't have any wasted usable addresses sitting out there we're not using, because there's only 2 addresses connecting router to router. All right, does that make sense to y'all on what we've done and how we did it? So then, here's the other part. The subnet mask for these 2 is going to start with a 255, 255, 255, because notice these 3 all use that same one. And then for this last position, it's not 192 like those 3 were, but now it's ones in the first 3 columns, and ones in the first 3 columns is going to give us 224. Is their subnet mask. So now notice you've got 2 different subnet masks, which goes back to what VLSM is. Questions on that? Now, your test on VLSM is not until after break, after spring break, because actually on chapter 8, if I'm remembering right on the calendar, is you've got this week and next week on chapter 8, plus you got spring break week, obviously. And so it's not due till April the 8th. Okay? So, Wednesday, Thursday, never mind. The next class meeting we have this week, Thursday, we can go back over this again, and then next week we can go over again on the VLSM and also cover a couple other little things that are in the chapter. And I can go over it again today if you want me to. I have a feeling I've thrown you enough at this point for you to at least go look at it for 2 days and then come back Thursday and we can go over another example and straighten out all the places that got mixed up in your head from walking out of here today. And get it back on the right path again. Are there any questions on it? Does it basically make sense to both of y'all? And what we're doing there?
Yeah.
And you see what we're accomplishing and why we're doing this? You may be getting a little mixed up on exactly how we're doing it still, but you see the reason we're doing it and what it accomplishes for you, that it's going to allow you to do. Because think in the real world, all of your subnets are not the same size. Just think of the school right here. number of student machines and the number of faculty machines is a totally different number, right? Or even in the classroom in here. There's one faculty machine. There's 20 student machines. Okay? So if we made the teacher subnet and the student subnet the same size, there'd be a huge wastage on the teacher side. Okay? Now if we go back to when we first were getting on the internet, back in 1990, it was pretty much flip-flopped. Because initially we were putting employees onto the internet and we just had computer students on the internet and didn't even have all these rooms with computers anyway. That the only room that had computers in it or had a number of computers in it for students was the computer students. And some of the other classrooms had just a couple of computers in them. Because they were still, like accounting was still doing almost all by hand, but they were learning a little bit about on it. So they just had a couple of PCs in there. Now, obviously, accounting has flip-flopped the opposite direction, and it's almost all done on a computer and just a little done by hand. Although you still do some stuff in accounting by hand. So if we go down there and look, they've still got adding machines in there because they do still use adding machines to verify sometimes what's on the computer, although obviously you can go to using the adding machine on the computer or the calculator on the computer too. But doing it with the adding machine does give paper tape that sometimes is an evidence trail. Sort of like they're going to have the new voting machines in Georgia with what's passed through the legislature. Because the voting machine is actually just going to be one that fills out your ballot for you. And then you're going to put it as a scanner and it's going to scan it and they'll keep the paper one and if they need to recount and verify. And also that you'll look at the printed one and go, yeah, it figured out what I wanted touching the screen correctly on who I was voting for. Now my problem with that is that's requiring people to do 2 additional steps, and how much are they really going to do on that? Are they going to forget to do something? And if the voting office gets really busy, is the workers going to make sure everybody does all the steps right there? One, you've got to look at it and make sure everything marked down it is what you meant to mark. 2, you've got to turn around and put it in another machine for it to scan it. And I don't know if that machine is going to keep the piece of paper or if you're going to have to put it in a separate box. And if you got to put it in a separate box, are people going to always remember put it in a separate box or to get it out of the other thing? Or what are they going to do at that point? Be interesting to see. And we'll find out in a year and a half. Because they intend to use them in 2020. Now that means the voting machine, other than it being hacked and changing what you marked on it, has no effect out there because it doesn't keep track of votes or anything. It's just a marking machine is all it is. And as long as people are verifying what comes out of it, it doesn't make any difference if somebody did get into it and messed with it. Because then everybody knows it's messing up and they have to stop and get it straightened out at that point. It's the scanning machine that will keep the results in it, and then they'll have a complete paper backup of those scanned pieces of paper to then go back and look at, and it won't be a case of did your pen have ink in it when you went to mark it or not, or how well did you mark the box versus how well I marked the box, and I was sitting there trying to figure out, did you really mark that box or did you mark another one? So that we don't have the problem of 2000 and that you don't have the question all of a sudden that one you used to punch holes on it. Sometimes in some of their ballots down there in Florida were handwritten on them, and it was figuring out what did people write on there How did they check? And if they checked two things and sort of scribbled on one, was that scribbling out that one, or was that supposed to be which one, or whatever? And y'all may have either of you counted ballots ever before in an election. You get weird things, because I have counted ballots for a number of elections back in the past. The voting machines were nice. We didn't have to worry about on them that it was people flipped and it recorded it. And they were purely mechanical on it, so they weren't hackable or any type of thing to it. Where now the machines you use obviously could be, but shouldn't be, because they're really not hooked up to the network unless somebody hacked them 4 months in advance and did correctly. And there in 2000 it was on the ones that punched things out. Did they really mean to punch that one out, that where the piece was still attached on it, or whether that just got done as it got handled through? So we'll see what happens. But that's it again on VLSM. It's using the same principles as what we talked about on just the regular subnetting. We've just taken it to another level. We've now added in this little piece here where we're subnetting a subnet. And that's all we did, is we just subnetted the subnet. Okay? And that made our subnet mask different for those two subnets as opposed to the other three subnets. And you could go further. You could have gotten to here, split these two, turned around, and just made that one there of that, and then subnetted this one several more places. Y'all follow on that? So you can, Class C, obviously, you can only do it a certain number of times. It was Class B, you've got 8 more positions that you could subnet down to. So you can get rather drawn down going down. Just remember, when it gets down to it, you can only do this to the point of where there's the 2. You've only got the first 6 to work with, because the last 2 have to be host addresses. Because you have to have 4 spots in the host area, 2 usable hosts. There's a network and a broadcast in there too. So you can't go any further than that. You have to leave over 2 positions for host, no matter what. But if you did that one, that would work perfect for this subnet right there. So you will see people subnetting all the way down to that position. And they might even jump at this point. Then they subnet that one all the way down to there to make it into 2 small subnets. Questions? If not, I will let y'all go early today, unless y'all have not happy with that. And I don't see any mutiny on that one. And I was recording it on my phone, so I'm going to